welcome to you Multicultural channel. This is the Newcomer Network and I am Jocelyn Gilbert. I am so excited to bring another interesting episode for you. And today we are going to talk about something that we are all experts on, and is taking risk. Why I say all of us are experts? Because if we are coming to Canada, or not maybe to Canada, to another country, this is a great risk, and we took it. So today, I am having Stacey Wowchuk. How are you, Stacey?
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on board.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So before we start talking about taking risks, I would like you to introduce yourself and talk to our wonderful audience about you, what you do.
For sure. Thanks, Jocelyn. So I'm an internal auditor by training, and that sounds maybe kind of boring. I'm not an accountant, though. What I do is I work with organizations and I help them improve their operations. I work with people, I work with systems, and I look at all of these things and I look for efficiencies. And often we put in place policies, procedures, different ways of practicing, because we're really concerned about risks. And we want to manage any kind of damage that might happen to an organization, to an individual. And so we'll put in place these risk prevention measures. But just because you're managing your risk doesn't mean you're being really efficient. You might be not allowing yourself to be as productive, as successful, as efficient as possible. So you'll bring in somebody like me who's an internal auditor, and we'll come in and we'll see where your risks are, what your goals are, and we help people and organizations move closer to those outcomes.
Yeah, and this is from the organization's perspective. But what about from the personal perspective? We all the time avoid risks.
Yes, I love this question, Jocelyn, because a risk isn't a bad thing. It's just something that is going to interfere with your objective, let's say. So if this is really important to you, you're going to work as hard as you can to get to that endpoint. And risks are the things that might interfere with it. So for example, you might really want to learn how to skate. It's a great season to go skating. It's winter where we are. So if you're going to go skating, there's a lot of risks that are involved in that. You might fall, you might hurt yourself, you may not know where to go. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take steps to manage those risks. You get a helmet, you plan out your route, you find skates that fit you properly, and you manage all of those elements so you can get to that end objective. I come back to risks aren't necessarily negative things, because it's just like taking a chance. Taking a risk is like taking a chance. You don't really know what the outcome is, but you hope that you're prepared enough that you can deal with any of those roadblocks or barriers that come along the way when you're trying to do something different, or try out a new role, or live in a new country, a new city, that sort of thing.
Talk to a new person.
Talk to a new person.
Start a new job.
Oh my goodness. Talking to a new person is a great example of taking chances, taking risks. Because I find, even for myself, I don't know about you, but you get in your own head a little bit. You think, oh, they're not going to want to talk to me. And you've already made this decision before you've even tried it. Well, who said no to you?
Yeah.
No one said no. No one said, oh, Jocelyn, you're not very interesting. I don't really want to talk to you. But you've made that decision yourself. And I would encourage all of the listeners, everyone really, when you find yourself thinking in that really limited way, you have to stop and you have to ask, what is making me think this way?
Yeah.
Why am I being my own roadblock? Why am I stopping myself from progressing and moving forward? And I'm interested to know what you'll come up with, because you might think of something like, again, I'm not that interesting, or what could I possibly contribute to the conversation? This person is so smart. This person has so many university degrees. This person has traveled to so many countries. People are interesting. Lived experience is interesting. And I'm always sad when I hear people limiting themselves, because that's a decision you're making for yourself. No one else is making that decision for you.
Yeah.
It's a good opportunity to sit in that and figure out why.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this to myself? when I need to be my own biggest fan.
Something that I love from taking risks, yes, is that when I'm in the process, because I'm always taking risks. I'm a, yeah, I feel that fear for sure because I'm human.
Yeah.
But I don't mind.
Yeah.
I jump.
Yeah.
So people are, don't jump, and I jump. But when I jump, everybody does after me. So that's something that I like.
Yeah.
And it's a way to inspire others, but it's challenging.
It is.
It is not easy.
Yeah.
Those thoughts come to your mind. You are going to die. This is not going to happen. What if you fail? And I never listen to those voices.
Yeah.
No, I jump.
Well, I'll tell you a story. One of my jobs when I was in university was working at LensCrafters, was selling glasses. And I worked at a location here in Winnipeg, and then I moved to Toronto for a little bit, and I worked at a location when I lived in Toronto. So when I worked in Winnipeg, we were always encouraged to sell second sets of glasses to people. So you would buy your eyeglasses, and then you would get sunglasses as well. Makes a lot of sense, right? But I would never ask people when I lived in Winnipeg if they wanted a second set, because I figured if they wanted it, they would ask me. They would say, oh, I would like sunglasses as well. But then when I moved to Toronto, I don't know what the change was. I don't know what the difference was. I decided, you know what? I'm just going to ask. I'm going to ask every person I work with, would you like a second set of glasses? And for the most part, they hadn't considered it. So this really limiting practice that I was doing in Winnipeg, didn't make any sense because no one was having the conversation with these individuals that were purchasing glasses. I sold so many second sets of glasses when I was in Toronto because I just asked. I raised my voice. I asked the question. I didn't let someone else make the decision for me, which is what I was doing in Winnipeg. And I use that example all the time because what's the worst thing that could happen?
Yeah.
Someone says no?
Yeah.
Well, that's great, because you're in the same spot as when you didn't try in the first place. But what if someone says yes?
Yeah.
Right? What does that opportunity look like? And yeah, we're coming back again to those limiting beliefs, those limits that we put on ourselves. And we have made a decision before we've even tried. And there's a lot to be learned in the trying. So bringing it back to audit, which is the area that I work in, you know, lots of organizations are nervous to try different things. And I say organizations, but it's people. It's people at the core, right? And so what are those things that that you're afraid of? Well, you're afraid of upsetting your shareholders or the people that you serve, let's say, or costing a lot of money, or making a decision that just fails miserably and publicly and hugely in your face, right? Like these are all things that we think about as individuals who work in organizations. But so if you think about an organization that's not willing to maybe try and do these different things, you're missing out. Organizations are missing out, and you end up getting stuck in the past. You're doing the same things over and over and over again. But the world around us is changing, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you kind of get pushed into these risk scenarios when maybe you're not ready or you feel like you're not ready, but you're doing it kind of against your will, right? Which is very different when you're making a deliberate choice about something. I'm going to apply for this job. I'm going to take this dance lesson. I'm going to learn how to drive a manual transmission car, right? These things that we decide ourselves, yes, we're going to do it. That kind of agency and independence when you're making a decision is very different than when someone makes a decision for you.
And something very common, it's people saying, I have always done it like that.
Yes.
And when we're coming from different culture, sometimes we struggle because we want to keep doing the same things that we did back home, but it's not the same. It's not the same environment. It's not the same people. The culture is totally different.
Yes.
So it can be challenging for some people when you don't have that open mind.
I love that point, Jocelyn, because when you're in a new environment, whether you're new to Winnipeg or Canada or even to a job, there's a whole workplace culture that you're walking into. And the thing that's challenging is the behaviors and the norms that aren't communicated, let's say in a policy or a process. And this is something that I've seen a lot of actually when I've been doing internal audit, is you have something that's written down on a piece of paper, but then you have how we do things around here, right? And it's a lot of that we've always done it this way kind of behavior and attitude. And that makes it really difficult for someone who's new to a workplace. So I think a good question to ask when you find yourself in a situation where you're getting the message, well, we've always done it this way, or this is how we do things around here. You can bring some curious and inquisitive questions into that work environment. So you could ask a question like, well, tell me about that. Help me understand. What is it about this that really works for your organization? And from those very simple, gentle questions, you'll get a lot of history and background into why things need to be as they are. And for me, again, as an auditor, we see so much inefficiency and dysfunction in organizations. I've seen so many scenarios where someone has a computer system, but they have a whole paper file right beside the computer. So they're effectively doing the work twice, which from an efficiency perspective makes no sense. But when you ask the question, well, tell me why you're doing it this way, they'll tell you, well, this computer has a program from 1981 and it crashes all the time and we lose all our information. So if I didn't have this paper record, we would have no record. So that's really different than saying, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why are you wasting your time like that? So you get to different places when you start asking these gentle, inquiring, curious questions about why things are as they are. You can even ask the question of, have you ever tried a different way? And listen to the answer. If the answer is no, there's another piece, right? Well, tell me why. What stopped you? Again, with the limiting beliefs, right? Or if they said, yeah, okay, well, tell me how that went. Wow, it was a huge failure. It was so embarrassing. Or somebody lost their job, or it set us back by weeks. And there's learning there too. There's learning in every one of those instances. And it all starts with a question, a gentle, curious question. Tell me about, or I'd like to hear more, or would you mind sharing? And people will share. If you ask people a question, again, back to my eyeglasses example, they'll answer. And what's the worst they're gonna say? No? Take that chance. It feels risky in the moment because it kind of feels like you shouldn't be asking that question. But ask yourself, what happens if I don't? Yeah. Am I missing an opportunity by sitting back and just letting things play out as they should?
Yeah, and sometimes it's being afraid of failure.
Yes.
So I'm doing that because this is the way we're doing. If we do it different, we are not going to have better outcomes, or other outcomes. And sometimes you are missing those outcomes that can be even better, but you're doing the same thing all the time. And it's something that we need to be thinking about.
Yes. I have a question for you, actually. Can you think of a time where you failed?
Yeah,
because I can. I have no issue thinking about that.
That's a common question.
Yeah.
And I always say, I don't think failure exists.
Yes.
Because failures are opportunities for growing.
Yes.
So I don't think it's a failure.
I think
it's a growing opportunity.
So if I may observe, a lot of that is mindset, right? It's how you're choosing to interpret that situation.
Yeah.
So is it a failure? In the moment, you might feel like it is. You might feel ashamed or embarrassed or terrified, or that awful feeling that you get yourself.
Yes, because sometimes you lose things.
Yes, you do.
Lose opportunity.
Yes.
You lose many things.
Yes.
But you learn from that.
I couldn't agree more. I honestly couldn't agree more. There's a concept in emergency management. So emergency management is how you prepare for disasters or some kind of a catastrophic situation. Most organizations have an emergency management plan. They have contingency planning, what they're going to do in the event of, let's say, a cyber attack, or there's inclement weather and people can't get into work, or there's an act of aggression or something like that. Most organizations will have a plan, and you practice that plan, so you get used to it. Same thing like a fire drill. We all practice getting in and out of buildings, because the risk in a fire is that you don't exit, you don't know how to do it, and that helps us manage or minimize that risk of fatality. That's why we do fire drills. So you should be doing what's called an after action report, or a lessons learned exercise, where you go through what you just practiced and you think about what went well and what didn't go well. And you could look at it like, oh, we didn't leave the building fast enough. We took 20 minutes. Everybody would have been dead. There's no way. So you take that learning, you could also consider it a failure if you really wanted to, and you change what you're going to do next time. You use it as an opportunity. You use it as a learning, and you just do things differently the next round. And you think about, well, okay, well, what did we learn there? All right, well, what took us so long? Were the elevator, did we have individuals that had mobility challenges? Well, how are they going to get down the stairs? Well, that's why it took 20 minutes. Okay, great. Let's do it differently next time.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a way to get prepared for the next time.
Yeah.
And I am a workshop facilitator, and it's something that I do all the time.
Yes.
Yeah. And at the beginning, I used to take it as something negative, or I failed in this area.
Yeah.
But now I look at it as a growing opportunity, because I'm doing trainings all the time.
Yeah.
So that means the next time I won't do that. I will do it different.
Yep.
The same with events. When I organize events, I take those areas of improvement into consideration for the following one. So yeah, that's the way it should be seen.
So this is my secret, and I call it the universal rule of party planning. No one knows what your party is supposed to look like but you.
Yes. With this program.
But it's true. Only you have the script in your head. Only you have, okay, at 1 o'clock, we're going to have past hors d'oeuvres. And then at 3 o'clock, we're going to do the dance party. And then at 5, we have opening presents, right? No one knows that schedule. So when something isn't going according to plan, just roll with it, right? Like, it doesn't matter to anybody else but yourself. And it's yourself. And that's who's, again, that's who's in the mix here. Is it's your own self deciding what's right, what's wrong, what should be happening, what shouldn't be happening, instead of just kind of taking a break and just letting it roll, just letting it happen, and knowing that you're smart enough and you're capable enough and you're resilient enough to figure it out. I think about this a lot, because we're better than we think. You know?
Yeah.
Like, we're more capable than we think.
We are very hard with ourselves.
Yes. I mean, and again, there's a very wise TV show host that says, if you can't love yourself, how are you going to love anybody else, right? So you have to be confident in your own self, in your own skills, in your own ability to be successful. Because no one's going to come in at the end of the day and say, Jocelyn, great job. Yeah. Did you ever host that show, or did you ever handle that super disrespectful person so well? I mean, maybe someone might come in and give you an award, but I would think about that even as a parent. There'd be some really hard days as a parent, right, where your kid is really challenging you, and all you want to do is just lock yourself in a dark room, but you can't. And then you make your way through the day. No one's showing up, at the end of your bed to give you a trophy and a medal and congratulate you on how strong you were in that moment and in that whole day. So you have to be able to recognize your skills, your own talents, and know how valuable that is when it comes to being with other people, working in other organizations, trying new things. We're all capable. We can do it.
I know today we're not talking about that, but I want to mention that this is why I try my best always, to find the positive things in people and telling them about those things. Yeah. Because sometimes people forget how wonderful they are, how amazing they are, the skills, the potential that they have. And I just want to remind them how good they are in certain areas.
Yes.
Because we need it.
Yes.
But sometimes when we don't have someone to tell us that, we need to remind ourselves that we are good enough.
Yes.
And forget about all the things we need to improve.
Yeah.
We have to, for sure.
Yeah.
But we need to focus on the skills,
Yeah.
on the good things, and stop being so hard on ourselves.
Yes.
And that's going to help us avoiding those risks, because sometimes we feel we are not enough.
Yeah.
We have the imposter syndrome all the time.
Yeah.
I think that's the main cause.
Yeah. I agree. And it could be, there could be some elements of culture to it too. Depends on how you grew up, who your role models were, depending on which country you've come from too, right? There's expected roles for women, expected roles for men. Some categories of individuals don't even exist in certain countries, right? Like there's a lot of roles that are put upon you depending on how you grew up.
Yeah.
And it's a huge challenge to break away from those ways of being and doing. It's really hard because sometimes it's in your DNA. You really have to be mindful and present and deliberate about shifting the way that you're thinking. And I think about this too when I'm doing my audit work, because audit is often critical, right? We're finding the things that aren't working, the non-compliance. So those areas where you aren't in alignment with what you need to be doing as an organization or as an individual. And it's really only kind of in the last 10, 15 years or so where I've started thinking about the why on that. Like, how is that happening? Well, you should know what your own organizational rules are. You should know where to find the policy. And then that leads me to a whole other area of questioning. Well, how should I know that? Where is it? Who taught me that? Is that in an employee manual somewhere? Is it on a wall so we can see it? Is it right on your front page on an intranet? How am I supposed to know that or find it? And so I think it brings a different perspective to working with organizations when you think about those things they should know. Okay, well, how? Who's communicating it? And it just changes the dynamic a little bit. So from saying this is so bad, it shifts to there needs to be better communication, right? Like it's not fair to expect someone to know the things they don't know, right? And even when you first enter an organization and you have this job that you need to do, okay, well, is there a job description for that? Is there someone who's going to be training you and being there with you so you can ask questions? Or is it kind of just verbal communication? You'll know it when you see it. I'm here if you have any questions, but they're never available. Like all those things that we do that set people up for success. And it's good to do that in the first week for sure. But if you can't sustain it and it isn't a consistent thing that you're doing, that's just as bad as not training somebody in the first place, right?
From the organization's perspective, what about those policies and procedures that you have mentioned, and talking about what I said before, saying those positive things about other people.
Yeah.
What do you think about those performance reviews that are based on all the things that you didn't achieve or you need to improve, but sometimes forgetting all the wonderful things that person did?
Yeah. This is a great.
And I would like to put them together because you're talking about onboarding, you're talking about that, but I'm talking about how important is to tell those people how awesome they are.
Yeah.
And what happens in performances reviews, it's that sometimes organizations focus on the areas of improvement, and that person is thinking about all the wonderful things that they did. Oh, I'm not good enough.
Yes.
I failed.
Yes. There's so many There's so many good little nuggets in here, and I hope that I can remember to talk about them all. But and it's a perfect question for right now, right? It's December. We're heading into.
About talking about that.
We're heading into
about that, but
it needs to be said. So December, we're heading into a new year. It's a time for goals. It's a time for reflecting on the year that was and the year that's ahead. So when I think about performance objectives, it's two parties that are involved with it. If I'm the person who is setting that performance objective with the individual, I have to know what I want them to achieve. So I personally have to have a good handle on what I want that year to look like and that larger goal that I'm chasing organizationally or personally for a business. And so I need to come to the table with my expectations for that individual's performance for the next year. At the same time, the other person, the other party, two parties, they need to come to the table with what they want to achieve and what they want to work on. And we have that conversation together, because sometimes I have an expectation of someone's performance that maybe is too high for where they feel that they are, inviting a whole other conversation about, well, tell me why you're feeling that way, right? Because I see you as someone who can definitely achieve that. But if you're not feeling that way, let's talk about it, right? And then they can get into things like, well, I don't have this training, I don't have this experience, I don't have this other thing. That's great. There's ways to solve that, right? Again, risk, control, manage it. So if you're feeling like you don't have experience, let's say in project management or time management, tons of training that you can get for that. And it doesn't take a long time. It can take about an hour to get a really quick overview of how to be a better time manager. And if that's the thing that's holding you back, can you imagine a 1-hour course is the difference between you taking on a new challenge and saying no, right? When you think about it that way. So I love a performance management conversation. I know that not everybody's supervisors are the same, but I love it because it's a real opportunity to talk about what it is that you want to do. And it's also a nice opportunity to talk with people about whether this organization or even the position that they're in remains a good fit for them, right? Because sometimes when we're getting into these negative performance conversations, it can be a number of things, but it could also just be that person isn't as fulfilled as they once were in that organization. Maybe there was a leadership change or change in direction, or they have different goals and objectives. And performance goal setting conversations invites that. It gives you the opportunity. It opens the door to what would be a difficult conversation otherwise, right? It's hard for me to come and say, I'm not happy here, which is essentially the communication, right? But I'll do it in other kind of passive ways. I won't be as diligent about my work, or maybe I'm not contributing as much in team meetings or team settings, or I don't want to take on new roles or new work, right? Like all these little things that we do to ourselves that kind of set ourselves up negatively. But if we just said, it's not working for me as it once was, what a difference that conversation makes. That's a really brave conversation. That's a big risk, right?
Yeah.
I don't even know, for me personally, I think I've had that conversation in 2 of my 5 jobs, right? And there's been lots of instances where I shouldn't have, or I should have, but I didn't, right? Because it's hard. It's really hard. You got to really trust in that other person.
You can make a decision.
Yes.
Of leaving the place.
Yes.
But there's also a risk.
Oh, for sure. And just on that point, for me as a workplace leader, I always appreciate the conversation from the person who's not happy, because it's my job to ensure someone's happiness. And I ask the question all the time in any performance appraisal. I routinely ask the people who work with me, what do I do that makes your life difficult? Is there something that if I were to change, it would facilitate different parts, or it would facilitate your success? Like, I'm always looking for ways that I can change the way I lead, because I do what's comfortable for me, right? I do what I'm used to, but when I know that it's not working for you, And for me to continue to do that, like that's not respectful, right? That's not a good way to lead and to manage. So I always want people to come to me and say, hey, you know what, this isn't working. And I can't tell you how much respect I have for that individual when they come and say this, like, I'm not happy here, as opposed to saying, I just got a new job, I'll see you later in 2 weeks, right?
Well,
It's a huge difference, because what is the, like, and you can't help, like, just as a human, you can't help but wonder, okay, was it me? Was it the organization? If it's someone you really like working with, okay, how can I make you stay? But when that person is committed to that next opportunity, they're gone. They're not coming back, right? And it denies you that learning opportunity. It denies you that ability to be a better organization.
yeah.
So I guess if there's one takeaway, talk to people when you're not happy, right? Like, let them know that this is not working. And you'd be really amazed by what a difference that makes in your workplace when you can have honest conversations like that, because it removes being passive aggressive and unhappy and all that negativity that accompanies someone who doesn't want to be in a workplace, but they stay there anyway. Have you worked with people like that? Because I can definitely think of a few people who are like that.
Makes me very sad. I know
Doesn't
people who are working in places that they don't want to be as, and then they have that behavior.
Yeah.
But sometimes those people have no other options.
I'm
As
gonna
a newcomer,
Yeah.
for example, when you are working with a closed work permit,
Yes.
you cannot
Yes.
change.
You know what?
Or
Right.
sometimes I know people, because of their age, they feel, oh, I have been trying looking for other jobs, but I don't find them.
Yes.
Or maybe the wages, I cannot find a job with the same wages. And you know, there are so many
There's so many
reasons why
factors. Yes.
people cannot move, but
Yes.
they are not happy.
Yes. But you know, it's not a forever thing, right? Even thinking about work permits, right? That has a time frame on it. So, you know, that next day after that time frame is done, right? Like, out you go. Go and look for that different job. It's not a forever situation. It's for a point in time. And that's always a good thing to remember, right? Even when you're having a bad day, coming back to taking risks that didn't go exactly as you planned, right? There's always tomorrow. Tomorrow is a new day. And I read this really great book, and it was talking about all of these individuals who have had these failings. I'm saying failings, I really shouldn't be, but you know, I don't know how else to say it. But you've been in these situations where they've been publicly embarrassed, or they've done something really terrible, and it goes viral and it blows up everywhere. And you know, you forget about these situations, but as an individual, you don't forget about it, right? Like, it follows you, but you don't have to live that way, right? You can kind of make a decision about, all right, I did this thing, wasn't super great. What am I going to do differently? How am I going to learn from this? What next step can I take? You can take that kind of emergency management, lessons learned perspective and kind of go through it. Where did I go wrong? Or what was my misstep? I went right when I should have went left, kind of thing. And you can self-analyze and recognize those points where, you know what, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. That person's reaction was maybe not what I was expecting. Okay, different story, right? Or some circumstance beyond your control happened. All right, talking again about risk, right? Like, that's a risk, that's going to happen. So what are we going to do differently next time?
Yeah.
How are we going to shift things around? But yeah, it's, you know, I think it feels sometimes in the moment like you don't have a choice, but doing nothing is a choice.
Yeah.
Right?
And you know, this is the first episode that we are talking from two different perspectives at the same time. We're talking from the organization's perspective and from the person's perspective. So I usually ask my guests for one advice. So this time I will want two advices. One for organizations and one for us.
Yes. So I think from an organization perspective, having been in executive positions in the past, it becomes really easy to differentiate yourself from the people that you work with, right? When you're in a leadership role, you can sometimes forget about what it feels like to be subjected to someone else's decisions, right? And we are all doing our best at all times. We really are. And it doesn't always feel that way. I think leadership and the people that are subjected to leadership decisions, it doesn't always feel that way. But the more time you spend with the people you manage, the regions and areas you manage, you get to know people as individuals, and their reactions to things make more sense. It's when you disconnect from people, from community, that's when you start to lose touch with what really matters. And you start to say things as an organization or as a leadership team like, how are they not happy, right? I know I've heard leaders that I've worked with say that. What more could they possibly want? Well, if you're saying that, then you are not in touch with the people that you work with. Or they're not being honest with you, which is a whole other thing as an organization that you need to be working. Why? That's the question. Why are they not being honest with you?
If you don't listen, I'm not going to tell you anything.
Yes. Or what's going to change? I've told you so many times and you ignore me every time. Or you ask for a suggestion and I make it and you do something different. Or you don't do it at all. Why would I spend my energy on that? So as organizations, as leaders, this is something you need to think about. Wow. You really, yeah, I know it's a big one. And then advice for individuals, we come back to what we were talking about at the beginning. Sell the second pair of glasses, right? Ask the question. Shoot your shot. That's another saying. You know, what's the worst thing that can happen? Keep that in your head. What's the worst thing that can happen? Raise your hand for that opportunity. Try that new food or that new dance move or whatever. Whatever the thing is that you're holding back on trying, go to school. Try it out. What's the worst that can happen? Oh, you learn something new, right? You meet some new friends, you make some new connections, or it's terrible. That's still great because now you know, I don't like this dance style. I don't want to do it, right? And you'll end up in the same space that you were potentially if you hadn't have even tried. But more often than not, you're successful. And I think that's the thing that we forget about when we're worried about taking risks is that we think about all the worst things that could happen. We're not thinking about all the great things that can happen. Yeah. And I think that's taking a page out of your book of saying yes and jumping.
Yeah. And I will say, jump. You will make it, and other people are looking at you and they will jump too. We are going to make it. Thank you everybody for being there watching our videos. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on YouTube, everywhere. We're everywhere. And click like, leave a comment, and see you next time. Bye-bye. This is Newcomer Network, a Multicultural channel, and I am Jocelyn. See you next time.